Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really thorough, hands-on review of the new direct-to-consumer wedges from Takomo. Now, this is a brand that's been making a lot of noise lately. So the big question we're trying to answer is, can they actually give you that top-tier performance, but at a price that won't break the bank? Let's find out. Okay, right off the bat, let's get this out of the way, because it's probably the most important part. The person who did this review is not sponsored. Takomo pays him absolutely nothing. So what you're about to hear is the straight-up, honest truth from his experience. No marketing fluff, just the real deal. Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get into the first impressions, the design and the looks. Then, we're diving deep into the hard numbers from the launch monitor. After that, we'll see how they actually feel around the greens. And finally, we'll get to the bottom line, the big one. Are they worth your money? All right, let's kick things off where every golfer starts, with their eyes. You know how it is. How does a club look when you put it down behind the ball? What kind of tech is it packing? That first look, that initial feeling of confidence, it matters a whole lot. So we're looking at the whole family here, the 46, 50, 56, and the 60 degree. And the first thing that just jumps out at you is that key feature, full face grooves. That's something you usually see on much more expensive high-end wedges. And the initial impression, they're, quote, saucy looking. They just look clean, they frame the ball perfectly, and they make you feel like you can hit a good shot. And here's what we mean by that. On the left, you've got your typical wedge where the grooves are just in the middle. But look at the Tacomas. The grooves go all the way across the entire face. So what's the big deal? Well, it's designed to give you more consistent spin, especially on those shots where you miss the sweet spot or when you open the face way up for a little touch shot. It's a premium feature, no doubt. Okay. So they look the part, but looking good is only half the battle, right? Now we get to the really fun stuff, the launch monitor data. When it comes to a set of wedges, one thing matters more than anything else, consistency. And that all comes down to the numbers. So the number one thing we're looking for here is something called gapping. Basically, is there a predictable, consistent yardage difference between each club? You have to be able to trust that your 50 degree goes, say, 10 or 12 yards shorter than your 46 degree every single time. That trust is how you score. So let's see how these Tacomos did. And wow, the results are pretty darn telling. Look at the gap between the 46 and the 50 degree. It's a perfect 10 to 12 yard difference. That's exactly what you want to see. And check out those spin numbers. Almost 9,000 RPMs on a 50 degree wedge. That is really, really good. That's your stopping power right there. But this is where we find our first little hiccup. The distance jump from the 50 to the 56 is almost 20 yards. That's a little too big for most players. Now, is it a deal breaker? Not at all. The reviewer points out that this is super common and incredibly easy to fix. You just take it to a club fitter and they can bend the loft a degree or two in about 5 minutes. Problem solved. All right, the data for full shots looks really solid, but we all know that wedges are your scoring clubs, and that's all about feel and what you can do with them around the green. So now we're going to focus in on that 60-degree lob wedge and see how it handles all those delicate little touch shots. But first, we got to talk a little tech. The 60-degree has something called a V-grind. So what in the world is that? Well, just think of them carving away a little bit of the sole on the heel and the toe. This lets you open the club face way up for a flop shot without the leading edge popping up too high off the ground. It's all about versatility. The other piece of the puzzle here is bounce. And this wedge has 12 degrees of it, which is on the higher side. Now, bounce is your friend. It's what helps the club glide through the turf instead of digging into the ground like a shovel. It's a huge help for most of us amateurs. The only question is, can a high bounce wedge like this still work off those really tight, firm lies? And the answer was a huge, resounding yes. It was actually surprising how well it worked. From those super tricky bare lies to fluffy rough to bunker shots, this wedge was fantastic. That combination of the V-grind and the high bounce turned out to be incredibly versatile. It just slid through the turf and produced high-spin, controlled shots from literally every condition they threw at it. It passed every single test. So we've seen how they look, we've crunched the numbers, and we've tested the feel. After all that, it really just comes down to one big, final question. Are these things actually worth the cash? And this is the number that really puts everything into perspective. $99 per wedge. I mean, all of that performance we just talked about, the great looks, the high spin, the fantastic feel, that versatile grind, for just $99. For comparison, a lot of the big name brand wedges are going to cost you close to double that. So let's just lay it all out. The final verdict is pretty much a home run. The pros are huge. They look amazing, they feel fantastic, they spin a ton, and they perform all over the course. And of course, that price is just unbeatable. The only con, the only one, was that minor gapping issue with a 56 degree, which, as we said, is a super easy fix. So this leaves us with one final thought to kind of chew on. In the world of golf, where it feels like equipment prices are just always going up, this totally unbiased review seems to suggest that maybe, just maybe, getting legit high-end performance for under $100 isn't too good to be true after all.